It's a little past the appointed time, so let's get started again. Reminder that the presentations will be available through the Water Center, I believe. So if you miss anything or if you want to take a look at something more detailed, Melissa will be getting a link out to participants for that. So our next presentation is on the Iowa Silver Jackets program. We have two featured speakers. Tom Oswald with the Iowa Homeland Security and Emergency Management Division, and Jason Smith, who is the Flood Risk Management Program Manager with the Rock Island Office of the Army Corps of Engineers. We have Tom's going to start out, and Jason's going to help out. Tom began his career with HSCMD in 2008 and is the Deputy Operations Lead within the Recovery Division. Oswald represents the Department of the Silver Jackets Flood Risk Management Team in efforts to reduce flooding impacts and long-term recovery efforts in Iowa. Homeland Security Emergency Management Division is the state's lead agency, while the Rock Island District is the lead federal agency in the Silver Jackets partnership. Tom represents the agency on other interagency flood risk management work and on recovery task force following flood events. Tom is also on the Homeland Security Emergency Management Division team as part of the Iowa Watershed Approach that you will hear about throughout the water conference. Prior to his service with HSCMD, Oswald spent 36 years with USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service in numerous positions and locations in Iowa, retiring in 2008. Tom works as a soil conservationist, water quality specialist with the Emergency Watershed Program, as a watershed planner, and as an agronomist. Tom was a 1979 graduate of Iowa State University and holds a BS in agronomy. So with all that, I'll hand it over to our featured speaker. Thanks, Tom.
If you notice the time frame of when I retired and when I started is 2008. I was offered the position on May 20th, 2008. And if you recall, the Parkersburg tornado was May 25th, which was very tragic up there. I think there was nearly, 8-10 people that got killed. And then we started the flooding, so my timing is impeccable. Anyway, how many of you are familiar with the photographer Dorothea Lange? How many of you are familiar with the Dust Bowl of the 1930s? Yeah, more of us. She was a photographer for the USJ Farm Security Agency, FSA, which preceded which is now the ASCS and now the current FSA. It preceded the Soil Erosion Service. How many of you heard of Hugh Hammond Bennett, Father of Soil Conservation in the United States? She took a photograph, the one that you may remember the most. You remember the one that was in the pea picker camp? And I don't have it with me because I just saw this special last night on IPTV. And look this up, and you just Google her name, Dorothea Lange. And her most famous photograph was the mother, black and white, with her two children, destitute looking, with her two children. And it was very poignant. One of the things Hugh Hammond Bennett did when he went to Washington, a dust storm followed him in from the plains. And it was rather appropriate as he was talking about the gee, we need to do something. Here comes this dust storm in Washington, D.C. Well, one of the things that Dorothea did when she would take pictures of these people, very respectfully when she talked to them, is that she would take pictures and she'd go write something down. Now, there's a really cool saying that she wrote down, said to her, root, hoe, or die. That has really nothing to do with silver jackets or anything, but this is a dust bowl that we're talking about. What Jason and I, and many of you, are engaged in is reducing floods. Well, maybe you're not. But if you're involved in natural resources, you are, because divorce yourself from floods with what you do in natural resources. You can't. We did programmatically for how many years? A long time. The government, in its infinite wisdom, said, no, we're just going to focus on non-point sourcing. Now we're saying we can't divorce any of those aspects of Silver Jackets Flood Risk Management Team. So we have a yellow jacket up there. We're running out of colors, okay? Silver Jackets Flood Risk Management Team, okay. The Corps of Engineers, when they are deployed in a flood or an event, they wear blue jackets. FEMA, when they're deployed, wears blue jackets. Now, I have someone on that I work with. She's a colonel in the Army Reserves, and I was talking to her about that because she's still active. And I said, "What, did they run out of colors?" And she said, "No, because silver denotes wisdom and knowledge about collaboration, field of expertise." Notice I have that, and he doesn't. I'm glad to ask him about that. No,
It's coming in.
it's coming in. But the thing is, when I started this, I was much taller, had more hair, but anyway. But the thing is that that is what it does, because we have people in the Silver Jackets team that have knowledge and that wisdom. So, with that in mind, what we're going to be talking about today is the Silver Jackets background, pilot projects, success stories, next steps. I'm going to take the first few slides, and Jason, as engineer, smart guy, he's going to take a lot of the pilot projects, and then collaboratively, the last couple of slides, we're going to talk about success stories and next steps. Now, some of you may have been around long enough that back in the 1990s, when there was a flood, what happened is that the Corps of Engineers, FEMA, NRCS, and the Emergency Management Division got together and said, "Who does that levy belong to?" "I don't know." Or the Corps would specifically say, "That's ours," but sometimes there was a great unknown. All right, and isn't that silly? The government doesn't know or the city or whatever doesn't know who it belongs to. Now, and then they said, "Okay, well, to divvy up the levies, this belongs to you," and most of the time it belonged to the Corps, and it did. But one of the things that led to is, isn't this rather silly that we do this? Iowa is leadership in a lot of stuff. And what this group of people did was, it led to a FEMA national policy. How do we divvy up the levy systems? And again, so it started, this flood risk program started about 2006, initiated the fall of 2008 because of the big Great Upper Mississippi River flood, aka the really big one, $10 billion with the B dollars just in Iowa. That's not just, that's top to bottom is estimated. By the way, if you're interested about what's gone on in the last 8 years rather, is that on May 16th and 17th, there is the Recovery Expo at the University of Iowa, and it's going to discuss the Flood Recovery Act. So, and you'll be getting more information on that, hearing more of that as things go along. So Iowa was actually one of the first states to join and create and to develop a Silver Jackets flood risk management working group. And our focus is to bring folks together before the flood event. And yes, we know each other, but you know what? It's nice to talk throughout the year, as opposed to saying, "Oh yeah, your name is yeah." So the first major test of this, it says 2001. I missed the one. 2011. I spent an awful lot of time in Sydney and Fremont County because that was where everything ended up. Knowing who you're working with, this is an amazing fact, folks, and what they're capable of doing, you can get things going pretty quickly. I mean, try it once in a while. And yet, again, the government, in its infinite wisdom, doesn't always do that. We're all guilty of that. But we realized from our initial groups that we needed more people, because more people actually wanted in. So since we initially started, we'll get to the whole group, we had a National Weather Service, USGS, Iowa Flood Center, IFSMA, which is the flood management folks. And by the way, membership is not closed with that. And we now, because of the efforts that we're doing here, we recognize the state has a mitigation team, which we as the agency have responsibility for. Well, golly, we have a lot of things that we do together. amazing when you're out there, when there's a flood fight going on, that people don't talk. Or they can't talk, or they don't communicate, they don't know how to communicate. And you don't want to learn how to do that in your middle of a flood fight. Leverage information, provide focused hazard mitigation assistance, identify gaps in the process. And this is who we are. You can see all the agencies. Homeland Security is the state lead agency. The Corps of Engineers, Rock Island, is the federal lead agency, the lead Corps district. Iowa DNR, Department of Ag, Iowa Water Center. Rick has been, and those folks have been on just in the past year, a very welcome asset. Iowa Flood Center has been on for quite a while. IFSMA National Weather Service, USGS, NRCS, NICO, DOT, Economic Development Authority, and FEMA. With that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Jason.
Thanks, Tom. Can everybody hear me okay in the back of the room? Okay. So one of the things, I guess I don't have a clicker, so I guess I'll go one up over here. So as Tom mentioned, really the focus here is instead of responding right when an emergency happens, the intent is to bring these partners together and really leverage what does each partner have in terms of their capability. What are their programs? What's their specialty? And so one of the ways we've been able to explore this is by doing pilot projects. We have an identified need, and then everybody brings their balls to the playground together. You say, okay, you're going to do that piece, you do that piece. And so here are a couple of the pilots that we've done over the past couple of years. Floodplain management, risk communication, flood warning systems, bridge sensor rating curve info. So I'll just go through each of these and provide a little bit of a background. One of the initiatives was creating this floodplain management risk communication in the Iowa Cedar. The idea was when we do actually come together, FEMA's got their database, the Corps' got their database, everybody's got their different databases. It sure would be great if we just all had one database at one place and one that everybody could be working from, and then update that. So it includes these different elements, demographic info, like who's participating in the National Floodplain Insurance Program, when were they last mapped, to proactive planning, hey, have they developed more rigorous planning standards, have they done watershed plans, to regulatory, what are the ordinances that they've passed? Some communities have 2-mile ordinances or different ordinances that are unique to them. And then quantitative flood risks. I don't know if folks are familiar with HAZIS, but FEMA has a HAZIS tool that tries to wrap their arms around what's the quantitative risk, how many structures are at risk, and what's the potential damage that could happen here. So we took some steps in trying to put all that information together in one place at one time. And this was just done for the Iowa Cedar as a demonstration of pilot with the intent. It's all geospatially referenced. You can clip out any one place and it would serve up all this information all at one time so that you could understand where your hotspots were for your communities. Indian Creek Flood Warning System. This particular system was a co-effort with the Iowa Flood Center, and the intent was to try and help the Indian Creek watershed build off of a public engagement process that identified a variety of different concerns that they had. And one of the things that they really struggle with is flash flooding. And so having a warning system there was incredibly valuable for that community. And I guess I just mentioned one more thing on this. The key here was trying to tie this to landscapes or milestones. Okay, when this threshold gets exceeded, that's when the high school floods out. That's when, you know, the ice cream store goes underwater, or whatever, things that people can recognize. It was important in the process. Iowa Bridge Sensor Rating Curve. This is a demonstration project. Historically, the USGS develops rating curves, which are a mathematical statistical way of identifying what's that 100-year level, what's that 500-year level, based on stream flow records. The Iowa Flood Center has deployed a ton of these bridge sensors. These sensors mount on the bottom of bridges, and they shoot sonar down, and they're only $3,000 versus $20,000. But and it's a great option for a community, but the challenge is that And so it doesn't give you all the stream flow characteristics of the USGS gauge. So the question was posed, how can we create rating curves for these bridge sensors that could really be used to support forecasting? Not replace the USGS gauges, but augment it and enhance our capabilities for forecasting and what we know. And so we had 2 phases of that. The second phase is about to wrap up. It's been incredibly successful. I believe the Weather Services is talking about how they might be able to incorporate it into forecasting. Muscatine and Cedar Falls levee breach scenarios. There's something called two-dimensional hydraulic modeling. Most people are familiar with one-way hydraulic modeling, but what happens when you have a levee breach is the water's coming down, but it's also backing up. And so there's some two-dimensional hydraulic modeling that's been done. A couple of really cool things. Muscatine Island, a really great success story there was that this particular modeling, the city had improved their levee to a 500-year level of protection, but the lower portion of the levee down here, the lower part of the picture, the southern region, that's all ag protected levee, and that's not as high, but when we did the levee breach analysis, it fills up the city of Muscatine just about as fast if it breaches down there as if it breached directly at their community. And so that was a real takeaway for them to say, hey, if we want a 500-year level of protection, we have to get this whole levee protected to 500-year level of protection to make sure that we're not going to have a problem with our bathtub filling in from a different level. Cedar Falls, similar. These are really valuable for evacuation planning. It allows you an understanding of where the water is going to come in, which areas are going to fill first, how much time you have. Is it 1 hour or is it 10 hours? Do I need alternate evacuation routes if it breaks in one place versus if it breaks in another? So this is all to support evacuations, emergency operations plans for these communities. Dubuque, we had another example. You pick a variety of different places in which the levee breach could occur. And of course the disclaimer here, just so everybody very clear, there's nothing wrong with their levees. All these communities' levees, they're just fine. This is to help them understand where the potential risk could be and things they might be able to do to non-structural to reduce their risk. Non-structural measures, impact on cedar communities. I'm going to be talking about this one in more detail here in not the next session, but one after. It's called Cedar River Communities. But the idea was that FEMA is publishing maps which are published 2012, 2013, 2014. Depending on what the community expressed in their risk map engagement process, they may or may not have updated the hydrology. In many cases along the Cedar River Basin, they had not, and so it was using 1970s, 1980s hydrology. And when we updated the hydrology in those communities, we had anywhere from a 3% to a 41% increase in the flow rate that should be associated with that 100-year storm. And so that was the beginning part, and then the next part was, okay, well, let's look at on a recon level, what can communities do about that? If you get the information, can you relocate? Can you elevate? Is there a rapid way to do the economics on it so that you know the costs of what it is to relocate or elevate? You know the height you need to get up to, and then what are the benefits? What's the damages prevented? Is there a positive benefit to cost ratio? Because oftentimes that's driving whether there's state interest or federal interest, FEMA interest in possibly cost sharing that action for you. So you'll see that for the Cedar River community, we picked the city of Charles City to do an in-depth investigation shown here, and we do have a positive benefit to cost ratio for both relocation and elevation. A lot of those tools that were developed for that previous pilot then led to the question of, well, are structure damages the only damages that are happening in this watershed? For a watershed that's very heavily agricultural, what are the agricultural damages that are happening in the Cedar River Basin? Are they more than the structure damages? Are they less? How does that fit in? So what these curves show is that there are damages that are associated with the time of year, but we basically took all those stream intervals, 5-year, 10-year, and the intent, and this pilot's still underway, is that we're working with RMA, the Risk Management Agency, the FSA, Farm Service Agency, NRCS, and IDOLS to try and match up. Is there landowner interest in possibly converting land to a conservation easement? And is there a federal interest in which it actually saves the government money instead of paying insurance costs on that land which you're subsidizing? You can pay it in conservation easements, which then provide you conservation benefits through the wildlife and soil protection and water quality, water infiltration, and a number of conservation items we talked about here today. So there are a couple new pilot projects that are going on. Just kicked off. One of them is the Iowa Flood Data Inventory. That one is going to be housed at the Iowa Flood Center. It's really just saying, hey, people have been working on a lot of models. And do we have one place that describes, lets you know what are all those models? You know, people are building SWOT models, or HSPF models, or this model, or that model. But if you don't know it, then you go and you start and build a new model, right? So can we be more efficient just by clearly showing, hey, here's all the models, here's the reason it was built, and you might be able to request that model, especially if it's built from a federal or state entity, and then you could modify it for your purpose. Watermarks and web tool, that's really identifying some risk communication, placing signs out in communities that have the little barcodes on them, and in the background, if somebody clicked on it with their phone, it would show them historic photos of that area with flooding. It would show them the history, different time periods. Gives them some really cool things that go on with that. That was very successful in Nebraska. The Omaha district's sort of taking the lead on that one. So, Tom, I'll hand it back to you for success stories, and we'll bounce back.
As I mentioned, the Missouri River flood was very successful with that because we already had things set up. Back up. How many of you know what Jason talked about non-structural alternatives? You know what that is? Some of you do. Okay. In the past, a lot of people said, gee, we're behind a levee, we're good, right? Well, what I learned from the Corps when I was at conferences with them, and we would go drink beer, and said, there's two kinds of levees. So, well, what's that? One that is broke, and one that will break. Okay? So the Corps has come up, and then they have they've really diversified since, quite frankly, since the treatment. They really have, in what the Corps has done. Now I say, well, you know what? Maybe we shouldn't build there. Or maybe a buyout. Or maybe we can wet flood-proof it, or dry flood-proof it, let the water run through, or elevate it. Those kind of things. Those are just a handful of things that we talk about when we talk about non-structural alternatives. So, and you know what? We couldn't more floodplain. And it's just a line on the map, folks. How many of us know that we have more intensive, more frequent rainfall events? It's a fact. And we know that from USGS gauging stations. That's a fact. It's inarguable. And we believe it's going to increase. So, throughout the old maps and with the new. And Doug Homeland here from the city of Clyde, we met with him. He's very interested in this. The city of Clyde has some problems coming up. And he's very interested in this. And I remember when we had a meeting on basically the non-structural alternatives in Coralville. Came up after the meeting, he was there all day, and he said, well, how do we work with silver jackets? And I said, what's the protocol? I'm sorry, Doug, I have to say this. And I laughed, I said, the only protocol is there's no protocol. And the neat thing about it is that the Corps has expertise in their programs, but I know where the Corps lives. And we have our programs, and they know where we live, we know where IDOLS lives, we know where DNR lives, and everybody, we know where USGS, all the partners. And like I said, if we want more, we'll get more. There's nothing in the charter that says, oh, you can't be, right? So yeah, I mean, all of this stuff is, it's really good stuff. But I think the neatest thing is that we recognize the state, as well as we should, that you
so no, I don't want to get in the habit of correcting Tom, but just so he's clear, of course, saying that levies will be overtopped.
Yeah,
And they will fail.
right.
They will always exceed their design capacity,
Right,
because they're
yeah.
designed to a certain thing. We want to be sure that
Yes, I agree. Yes.
so yeah, either they haven't been overtopped yet, or they have been overtopped. Those are the only
They have a lot of
comments that
fears
you've
when
got.
they say
Yeah, I sort of like your interpretation. I just don't want to give people the impression, after showing a bunch of levee breach images, that, you know, every levee is about to breach. So our next steps, we're continuing ongoing pilots. We've had some discussions with the city of Clive on whether they might be a good candidate for another pilot, where we'd be looking at some of the different land use and non-structural options that they might have. We want to continue to grow the interagency partnership, and really the central tenet to it is just to continue to remain prepared for the next flood event, because when that flood event happens, every second that you can come together faster, you're able to get boots on the ground faster, you're able to help people out faster, get your programs going faster. That's one day quicker that people can get back into their houses, get back into their lives, get back into their businesses, and all these different things. So that's the big takeaway. If you're interested in the Silver Jackets program, please talk with Tom or I more. Sir?
Tom or Jason, Tom, I believe it was Mark.
That sounds right.
But anyway, one of the issues that I always have is that I represent cities almost exclusively. And we have an emergency event. It's pretty well described. The city manager is in some sort of. But we do a lot of planning for Homeland Security. But the group that's not represented is public works folks. They need to be part of the process all the time rather than emergency. They need to clear it in terms of exposure, liability, and so on and so forth. But that's really the problem. There's a disconnect. We do emergency planning, but in terms of actually we've done with emergency we've done scenarios and test runs and testing for this budget. But you really need to have those folks actively involved, whether it's city of Clive or anybody else. We need to be able to say, these folks got to get it, we understand. And then, which is really true, because in 93, it was a scary, disappointing exhibit of too many drops. We couldn't even figure out where to get the, as Jen says, we couldn't figure out where to get the pumps. A lot of us spent time and effort watching the levee rise, river rise, without any hope of doing anything about it. Since that time, of course, unfortunately, we've got a lot of options in practice. It's so much better than it used to be, but you still lack that part of it.
We've had a lot of practice because Iowa has had, as I recall, kind of correct me if I'm wrong, the last 10 years we've had more disasters, the last 10 years that we've ever had.
That is correct.
Presidential
Presidentially
declaration, yes.
declared
And I
events.
don't know, I put you on the spot or anything. I do know that when we had Clyde, you had your public works folks there, so that's a good point. The one thing that we like is Washington Management Authorities. We like working through them because every public entity is invited to sign the with 20E agreement. They don't all have to, but they're invited. So.
Okay, a couple more, and then
Tom, if I can make a pitch back to the gentleman up there, and I'm sorry I couldn't hear what his name was, with regards to planning and making sure that the public works folks are engaged in that. The county, every county has an emergency manager. They do, part of that is dealing with infrastructure, planning, and they do outreach to the communities through their commission down to the engaged agencies within those communities. And sometimes they can and sometimes they can't. But if we can all work together, as somebody who's very passionate about that part of it, work together to try to get those people involved and engaged in that process, will make a much better product in the end.
Yes, so I'm trying to understand all this. I'm in the stormwater quality and flood management part of it, the post-construction side of it. I'm familiar with the watershed management authorities. And so the Silver Jackets seem to be more reactive in preparedness and trying to plan for floods. And so I'm wondering, is a component also looking at potential land use
Next year, you're gonna provide us with actual silver jackets to wear around, so people will know which one was the
Well,
which.
I would add one thing is, these pilots are largely focused on preparation cycle of your hazard cycle. You're gonna respond, so you got all these different pieces. The intent is to bring all the partners around a plan for what they want to do, whether that goes in their hazard mitigation plan, and then the individual agencies' programs to kick in to drive towards that realization. So whether that means FEMA, you've identified houses for buyout or raises, and FEMA's hazard mitigation program kicks in, or if it's focused conservation in reducing increased flood stages in future development areas, or whether it's stormwater programs at a city or a county level where you say, hey, we're gonna call this many bioswales, this much retention structure. This is where we want to guide our ordinances and the way that we're governing our city. Where we run into challenges is sometimes, like in the case of Clive, they're at the bottom of the watershed. So they get what comes down from the top. So if you're not working at WMA scale, then you can do all the good intended things down here, but if they're increasing the flood peak up there, or they're not doing some things up at the top, then you may bear the brunt of it anyway. So they'll work within their program, but the idea is to get everybody focused around a central plan for where the watershed wants to be at, and then to align each of the agencies' programs to help you get there.
Okay, I think we might be interested in being involved.
Yeah, and I can put you on our distribution list.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, we're a little late on time. Let's thank our speakers.